Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome! We have the monthly report for the Persistent Universe available for all of the work that went on in the month of September. It is quite a big one, so let us break it down. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members, in particular to my latest channel members, Mason, Stormer and Sharkskull, but also to a bad motherfunker for rejoining. Thank you all so much for the support. So, kicking off with the AI features team, they continued to develop the traits that allows the specialization of NPC behaviors in specific levels and scenarios. Now this time they were implementing the sentry trait, which forces the NPCs to use defensive tactics, and to never leave cover unless compromised, which they say will be useful for NPCs equipped with sniper rifles and rocket launchers. But I suppose as well, this trait could be useful for static guards, posted to guard a doorway and such. Hopefully it will be quite a useful trait for when we're hiring NPCs and having them stand post. The next trait is called the Reckless trait, and this is kind of the opposite, forcing a character to only adopt aggressive tactics and never use cover options, which will be utilized by the combat berserker enemy type, with also aggressive and cautious traits that adopt varying weights of cover use. So nice to see more traits coming in, as these will really help to define the characters in more complex ways. Clearly they've created the polar opposites with the sentry and the berserker trait or the reckless trait, but then also having the aggressive and cautious traits that vary in between. AI features also implemented usables that allow context-specific search animations to be played around certain level features. So for example, vents over railings and around crates, which they say will add life to NPC investigations and give them more opportunity to use the environment to search, along with increasing the tension for hunted players. And I do hope that this searching ability really keeps us on our toes, because in most games, once you learn the basic search behavior from the AI, you know what's coming, you know where you can hide and where you can't hide, so having this ability to maybe look over a railing and see you down below will have you constantly questioning what's above you, what's below you, and that kind of stuff. Perception work continued on, with the team supporting the stealth gameplay loop by allowing players to wear specific clothing to disguise themselves in different environments. Now the designers can configure which clothing works with each faction and location, so that a successful disguise combines both player actions and the configuration of the NPCs in the environment, which I do like the sound of. The perception meter for detecting the player as a foe is then influenced by this perimeter, giving the player more time to sneak into areas, especially when at distance from the enemy. Now this is great to hear. Having the ability to maybe infiltrate a gang or a faction's base by obtaining their outfits and uniform is going to hold a lot of potential for gameplay, like assassinations, like the Hitman series for example. Even missions that require you to just steal something, or just general gameplay using this system to get what you want. Maybe there's a crate in this outpost that you want to go and get something from. You can try and sneak in and hope that you don't get too close. Now, to support the scaling of perception ranges and times, new wild lines were integrated to signal this new gameplay. For example, a suspicious enemy will challenge the player if their disguise or behavior isn't convincing. And finally, on the animation side, they progressed with the human-female combat animations. Now I'm really intrigued to see how deep this kind of blending in mechanic is. Will our movement have a play into it? So if we're running and jumping and whatever around an environment acting abnormal to the rest of them, proximity to other members of the gang for certain durations will certainly kick off a bit of suspicion, but also considering how many gangs and groups there will be in the game, and combine that with the reputation system, this is going to be extremely important to getting access to areas where you kind of shouldn't be. Now for the AI tech teams, they extended the functionality of navigation links, finishing their work on ladder extenders, so basically NPCs can now use ladders. They also extended these navigation links for doors to allow NPCs to use the entire width of the door and enable collision avoidance while traversing, which we heard about in last month's report, just basically allowing them to pass a doorway when there's multiple people trying to get through the same door. Now the way NPCs interact with closed doors was extended as well, with the aim here to have AI correctly understand which door panel should be interacted with during traversal. And to achieve this, the routing functionality inside the usable system was improved to use entity links. So all of this is kind of allowing NPCs to maneuver around the environments just like players can, going through doors, climbing up ladders, eventually using trains and elevators so that NPCs can move around just like players can, which will of course tie into NPC crew and the population in general. Now for locomotion, they worked on reducing foot sliding and leg phase blending. This involved reducing foot sliding during stop animations by matching the leg phase, adding support for selecting the best animation option based on the leg phase. And they also extended the system to implement the use of sharp turns for walking. Now, work was done to extend two different areas of AI perception functionality. The first not only allows NPCs inside ship cockpits to target on-foot enemies not visible on the radar, but also allows NPCs on the ground to visually track large objects such as vehicles and engage in ground-to-flight combat. Now, this is going to be pretty epic and also very scary. Having NPC ships shooting at you while you are on the ground will have us all scrambling for cover, but also having NPCs firing at ships from the ground will mean we need to take better, safer approaches to environments and make sure that we're avoiding missiles, railguns, and flak eventually. Now, the second AI perception functionality is audio, and previously NPCs could hear any sound if they were at the right distance from it. But now the hearing component and audio map uses the volume of the sound at its source and then calculates the strength of the audio received by the listener. Now, this is used inside the perception component to influence the perception meter based on how strongly the sound is perceived. And the new extension allows the designers to create multiple curves to describe the influence of the different audio semantics. And for example, an explosion will have a different influence than footsteps. It says each audio stimulus also has a different maximum value that can push the perception meter as well. Now, this is very interesting and complementing much of the work that is going on for stealth and blending in and so on. But I also suspect that this will be utilising the new Claudius audio system that we heard about at last year's CitizenCon, allowing sound to be masked by closer sound. So, for example, an AI could be stood next to a generator and they wouldn't hear you clattering around in a room down the hall, whereas if you are stood next to a generator and clattering around, they may hear you, but you might be able to use that sound to mask some of your actions. Now finally, for the AI tech team, the idle system was extended to allow the designers to set up different weights in the idle sets available to use different usables, which will allow them to basically better customize which idle sets should be prevalent during the selection based on the environment they're creating. So I presume that this is to ensure more believable NPCs in the background, choosing an animation that is appropriate to the location, and hopefully this being determined by what other NPCs in the environment are doing, so they're not all running the same animation at the same time. Now on to vehicle AI. They worked on AI being able to target things other than vehicles, like turrets, components, and stations, which they say this combined with special behaviours for strafing runs allows the AI to perform attack runs on stations, which clearly a Squadron 42 thing here, I would think, but it'll be fun watching this come to the persistent universe, and I can just imagine chasing down members of Xenothreat as they're hurtling towards Jericho Station, trying to stop them. That'll be kind of cool. Now, for the facial animation team, they dedicated most of the month to multiple Persistent Universe character sets, including lines for rescue transport gameplay. Love the sound of this, and it is likely referring to the rescue transport mission type that is on the progress tracker, which actually had its work ending in September. They also provided mocap and on-set facial services for the marketing team, and finally they're currently working on cleanup and facial animations for various Q4 events. Now, for the character art team, they prepared various new armours, worked on the sub-program, and progressed with Stanton's Earth fashion outfits. So I'm assuming more like what we're kind of wearing now. On the concept art side, further development was done on Frontier outfits, which are going to be found on the Residents of Pyro, undersuits and helmets, medical armour, which is very exciting to hear, as they have said that they want to provide more support armours and not just combat-orientated armours, but also creatures. And I can't wait to see the work that they've been doing on creatures, because it sounds like they've been really ramping up production, hiring new people, getting on with, I hope, creating the creatures, but it will be amazing one day when we can see multiple creatures all in-game just going about their own business. Now, on to the ship art team. They took the Drake Corsair through final art and are now currently putting the finishing touches on the wear and tint system. They also created new geometry for the exterior of the docking collar and took it through final art with animations and lighting, so hopefully it'll be able to use docking as well, with most of the team now moving on to level of details and the damage mesh. Very excited to see the Corsair, and I'm very happy that it's coming in with 318. That is going to be great finally getting my hands on it. Now, the team also did say that they're experimenting with a new setup system to trigger lights on the exterior of the ship for specific states, such as landing and when the lift is being used, which they say will allow for a more dynamic lighting experience. Now, this sounds like it could really add a lot more to the overall feel of vehicles, especially industrial vehicles. Having like rotating orange flashing lights as the ramp or elevator comes down while you're doing your cargo runs, I think that would just add this bigger element of feeling like you're a cargo professional. Now, additional support was given to get the Drake Vulture ready for release, also coming in 318, very happy to see that one. And in the UK, the ship art team continued working on the Argo SRV, which is progressing through Greybox, with only habitation remaining. I do expect that we will get a look-see at some of these ships at the last panel of CitizenCon, and very likely some that we haven't seen before. The final art pass on an unannounced ship was completed in preparation for review this month, with the team saying, "We're very pleased with how this ship turned out. It is a great opportunity for us to push the workflow and visuals forward. For example, these exterior lighting states that we've heard of, better looking glass and glows on exterior lights, new damage trims, and new artwork for countermeasures." So very interesting to see what all of this will culminate to. When it is revealed, could be the CitizenCon reveal, it might be something like IAE, we will see. Also, an unannounced ground vehicle passed its final review gate with some small alterations to the dashboard being made to improve the visibility of the speedometer alongside polish tasks. Now, this is actually referring to the recently leaked Greycat STV, which looks like a two-seater buggy, and the STV stands for Sport Terrain Vehicle, which features, it says, blazing speeds and convenient storage. Personally, I do love the look of this, and hopefully for 318 we can see the physics updates that have come for wheeled vehicles. Not sure when that's coming in, but CIG have also altered many of the speeds of the ground vehicles, with this particular ground vehicle being one of the fastest. But of course, as it is alpha, do expect more changes and alterations to stats, specs, and everything as it continues to develop. They are not done yet. Now, it says that the Hull C polish pass concluded with all major bugs and improvements completed. Now, to me, that sounds like it's ready for release. Could we see this during CitizenCon? Could it be released for 318? I'm not sure if there's anything else left to do, but with that statement, it certainly sounds like it's complete now. And I think they have been holding it off for the cargo refactor, which is still coming in 318, so hopefully there will be a place for the Hull C now. Work also completed on an upcoming variant, still no idea what this is. And finally, the resource management pass on the Aegis Hammerhead continued, with a new gravity generator room being added. The team also began implementing the new component bays. So it got a new gravity room, very nice. And this system, we will see a lot more on Saturday at CitizenCon, called Power Play. I think it's the second to last panel of the night. Can't wait to see it. It's probably the one that I'm most excited for. Now, on the engine side, the physics team made changes in the level export code to enable the reliable attachment of roped to other entities on the client. For the renderer, more progress was made on the Gen 12 transition, cube map backdrops, light beams, geom caches, silhouette rendering, water volumes, water reflections, and water caustics were ported, plus various editor tools now run with Gen 12 as well, like the character editor and mannequin. Now, memory tracking for graphics passes was added. Gen 12 now also supports texture anisotropy overrides, as well as global MIP bias. Not a clue what any of that is. I don't even know if I've pronounced that right. Material resource binding was refactored, and alpha blending support was added to the hologram shader. Also, various optimizations were done to avoid redundant clears on render targets and updates on pass resources. Also, the Gen 12 port of volumetric cloud rendering was completed. Now, it was mentioned over on Spectrum recently, I believe, that a dev will be giving us an update on the Gen 12 renderer and the reaching of this milestone. It was also mentioned in the leaks that they are now utilising the new scene renderer, with one dev apparently stating that it should bring a significant performance and efficiency improvement compared to the current renderer, and is likely to make its debut in 3.18. And in regards to the clouds, it was also mentioned that this should fix the issue where they look blocky and pixelated, and now potentially be somewhat comparable to the clouds of Microtech Flight Simulator. So very interesting to hear about this, and hopefully that'll be something that we'll get as soon as possible. Now, for the character and weapons feature team, they continue to work on the underlying systems for FPS devices, which involved adding features such as timers and proximity triggers, and support for behaviours such as explosions and actor status effects when devices are triggered, which, for example, they say will allow the team to replace the out-of-date flashbang logic. This will be great fun, having devices that affect us like flashbangs, so our vision, our audio is affected temporarily, which will be much needed, especially when it relates to this next bit. The team began prototyping the flow for restraining NPCs and other players, which will be used when an enemy is incapacitated or surrenders. Basically, the player can apply wrist and ankle restraints to ensure that the enemy is not able to recover. However, other players or NPCs can come along and remove these restraints, so a small risk, it says, for players who want to avoid using lethal force. Now, this will have very many applications in the game, both PvP and PvE, even as just a challenge to go full Metal Gear Solid mode and not kill a single enemy at an outpost, but ultimately a great and necessary addition for bounty hunting. As we know, they are looking into fleshing out the full bounty hunting career. I think they're working on the design plan for it, if I remember correctly, so cannot wait to see this come along. Combined with flashbangs being able to maybe capture someone alive, it is going to be so much fun. Now, moving on to gameplay features, they continued to support the release of Salvaging Tier 0. They also made several quality of life plans for mining and loot generation that will be looked on after the release of 3.18, and both features, it says, will receive a general balance pass, while the team is looking to improve multi-crew mining, for example by adding benefits to using the Argo Mole over several prospectors. Sounds intriguing. Now, work continued on the resource network, which involved gameplay features working alongside vehicles to unify the way temperatures are controlled throughout ships, including the coolers that some ships carry. Again, more on this whole resource network on Saturday for CitizenCon, but temperatures for rooms will be tied into gameplay in some situations. I'm sure in the past we have heard about having temperature-conditioned cargo, ensuring that the cargo hold is at the right requirements for that cargo. And I think it was also said that the work on life support gameplay was complete now, and they're moving on to the gravity generator. However, that might not include the downstream team's work or maybe even UI, although we have seen them prototyping the screens for UI. So yeah, more on Saturday for that. Finally, the EU-based Persistent Universe team began supporting their US counterparts on the Cargo Refactor as it approaches release. And we will be hearing more about the Cargo Refactor on Inside Star Citizen once it's past its 3-week hiatus, as it is still intending its initial rollout with 3.18. Nothing has changed there. We will hear more once Inside Star Citizen is back. Now, for the mission feature team, they made improvements to help differentiate between a trespass zone and an area controlled by unlawful hostiles. Significant progress was made on time trials too, including improvements to allow the designers to create an infinite number of checkpoints of any shape with an area tool. So expanding the racing, I guess. Progress on the investigation mission mentioned last month was made, with the team saying, "We feel we are ready to let narrative go wild with creating mysteries aboard a variety of ships and surrounding environments." Now, this is something that we will also hear about at CitizenCon a little more, as the second panel is about this new investigation mission type, which does sound very exciting, having a variety of space areas or derelict ships, maybe not even derelict ships, as the panel describes, will ditch combat and delivery and focus on mindful deduction and increased storytelling. So it does sound as though it will require us to maybe board a derelict or a ship at a location, look around that location, explore a little bit, searching for clues or information as to what happened, which could lead us elsewhere or maybe reward us with something. Again, not too sure how this is all going to play out or how repetitive it's going to feel, but I am definitely looking forward to hearing more on Saturday. Now, for mission features, they worked with UI on the redesign of the contract manager, with specific features and problems being worked through each week. Finally, for mission features, Plans for the team's work up to Q2 2023 were proposed, including many new and long-anticipated mission types. Man, I would love to hear more about what they have planned. Okay, so moving on to vehicle features, they focused on supporting the release of persistent entity streaming, which included work on the transit system, which received a significant refactor to cope with how things now stream. They also spent time improving older systems, including tiles, which is the underlying tech system that connects objects to power and other resources, which has just occurred to me, this is actually in regards to the whole resource generation system, where if a room is getting power or a room in a ship is getting power, if you put a lamp down anywhere in that room, it will work, it'll switch on, and this will go for any other objects and items that require power in the future. Provided that location is getting power, they will work. And this is something that we will again see at CitizenCon for Saturday, and hopefully even demonstrated in maybe a homestead. They also reworked the aiming and gunnery system, which received upgrades for future release to simplify and improve things, for example making weapons significantly more accurate and reliable in vehicles. For new systems, the team worked on the EU Persistent Universe team's resource network, converting vehicle systems to utilize the new implementation and updating all item behaviors, and they also progressed with features driven by the needs of Squadron 42, like the ship MFD system, which has been fully planned out and designed and is currently being implemented into the game. Hopefully this means once it's in Squadron, it's proved out there, it'll come to us so we can have new proper MFDs. Now for the graphics team, they completed work on Edge highlight rendering code in support of the FPS scanning of occluded objects. Very happy to hear more progress on FPS scanning. This involved creating a new render to texture layer used exclusively for augmented reality rendering, which will be used for all augmented reality and in-world UI rendering going forwards. The shader used for augmented reality rendering was also upgraded to support tessellation smoothing, triplanar texture mapping, and dynamic multi-scaling texture. No idea what triplanar is, sorry. So I'm assuming some of what they mentioned here is what we saw in Inside Star Citizen sneak peek as well, where we can see the really cool examples of what they can achieve for UI with the 3D hologram style stuff being all in-game rather than on the screen. So definitely a great direction, and I'm happy that it's getting worked on now. The graphics team also investigated the possibility of using D3D, Vulkan's anti-aliased line rendering for rendering wireframes on UI meshes. However, they decided to go with a shader-based approach using tessellation hardware due to the performance issues in the drivers. The team also began looking into improving and unifying all resource streaming systems with the goal of simplifying the code while allowing more intelligent use of the available memory so that they can adapt to the different scenarios across the game. And also work on the ultra high-res screenshot output was completed for the marketing teams. This will be nice for very fancy screenshots and wallpapers, of course. Now, for the visual effects programming team, they continued to work on the damage map feature for salvage, which included supporting the vehicle artists to get the most out of the damage shader, adding support for vehicle debris and fixing bugs. And from what I have seen on the damage for salvage and scraping and repair, of course, it looks incredible. Now, the Planet Tech team are currently in the process of delivering Rastar version 1, which is the internal tool used to build modules and populate planetary environments with outposts, derelicts, and cities, it says. Now, this tool was also mentioned to be how players will eventually go about building their own homesteads to some degree. It won't be the exact same front-end tool, but it's very exciting to hear that version 1 of this tool is almost ready for delivery. Not for us, but for the internal teams, as this will allow the teams to drastically ramp up the speed at which planetary buildings of all types can get built. Not to mention, it specifically states cities. So other locations planetside like towns, villages and cities, we know that we will have the main cities like Lorville, New Babbage and so on for each planet, but there will be smaller environments, maybe smaller cities as well. They are just the flagship cities. So can't wait to see how this opens up development and really just allows the designers to populate planets and moons and whatnot, anything that requires it, with points of interest like this. Now, the Planet Tech team also improved the river tech for 3.18 with several bug fixes and a new spline system to better match complex topology curvatures, and finally they made fixes to the Gen12 rendering of planets ready for Alpha 3.18. Big things are coming along right now. Now, for the lighting team, they continue to work on Pyro's Ruin Station. They also completed the necessary lighting pass on the updated security post Correa, working alongside the core development teams to push it to final. And I will say, the interior of Correa looks very interesting, giving it the impression that it's actually in use and functional, which is a nice addition. Lighting also fulfilled requests for footage that will be used in an upcoming event. Not sure what this event is. My guess most likely would be the Intergalactic Aerospace Expo in November. Now, the EU Locations team, they focused on Pyro, progressing with the art and design of Ruin Station, which I will point out is the main pirate station found in the Pyro system. There is a few derelict stations that are kind of owned and operated by gangs, but Pyro is the main one, and that is currently where Xenothreat are in charge. Now, they also developed several other areas, including Correa, an upcoming event space, and older landing zones, adding new animations to bring them to life. Now, this event space could just be where Intergalactic Aerospace Expo will take place. I don't think we know where it's going to be this year. Could be Orison, if I was to guess, with them messing around with the floating platforms. That would be kind of nice. Now, for the narrative team, they are putting the finishing touches on the IAE work, with the team progressing with many of the initiatives started last month, including mission work for Alpha 318's patch and beyond. They also worked very closely with design on the terminals and kiosks that players interact with, alongside the text on the contract manager. They've assisted with planning future improvements to the contract manager Mobiglass app to make it more robust and player friendly, and they've also begun discussing upcoming work to continue improving the new player experience and help players better understand Star Citizen when they first enter the verse. For the Interactables team, they spent time closing out some of their consumable work for Ruin Station and worked on various marketing assets that will be in players' hands soon. For the QA team, they focused on persistent entity streaming related testing. In addition, the PU content teams tested all 318 deliverables, providing continuous assessments for each feature and one final assessment before the official feature review meetings. For the tech animation team, they progressed with the face scanning initiative that we heard about last week or last month, which aims to add more heads to the game's gene pool. Now, this initial scan session saw an extra 20 female heads scanned, which are currently being processed by the art team, and tech animation will then rig and implement the assets into the engine. Now, alongside all of this, the team explored and refined their methods for implementing geometry caches into the engine and Maya's deformation tech, with the team saying, "We have some exciting developments with some of our elements in game that will take them to the next level of visual fidelity." Very exciting. Looking forward to seeing what they are. Finally, for tech animation, they assisted in the creation and implementation of new enemy types that are being worked on by other feature teams. Now, for the Montreal Live Tools team, they finished integrating the new module dedicated to seeing infractions committed by players and worked on design improvements for the Hex tool. For the UI team, they continued their ongoing work on the Star map. Last month, they say they added new tech to allow them to create interactive hollow volumes using the UI system, and this provides them extra flexibility without having to rely on the content teams if they wanted to add a 3D hollow volume to the game. As well as being used on the standard ship radar, which is that little ball that we have in the cockpits, this will make it possible to have large, real-time holospheres on capital ships in the future. And this isn't just capital ships, this is all ships scaling from single-seater with your little radar in front of you, to the Carrack having their command and control center, all the way up to capital ships. So there's a few things to speak about here. Firstly, Star map progress is always great to hear, and it's great hearing that they're now using this UI system to bring these hollow volumes in. I really hope that their reluctance to show us anything about the new Star map is because they plan to reveal it sometime in the near future, rather than just trickle it out a little bit here and there on, sprint reports. But it also sounds like they are using some of this UI tech that we did see on Inside Star Citizen recently, where it kind of showed us what they can achieve. But these holospheres for capital ships are going to be incredibly epic to use. Having real-time data of fleet locations and potential enemy locations, allowing players to then coordinate and communicate to properly command large numbers of ships. It'll be pretty insane when we have to get to battling with multiple ships and using this coordinated feature. Now finally, we have the visual effects team who continued prototyping the new quantum travel visual effects rework with a focus on refractive elements to emphasize the forming of the hull-hugging bubble while a ship's drive is spooling up. It does sound like they want to make quantum traveling a lot more of a bigger deal than just hitting a button, waiting for a few seconds, and then jumping. I think they want to make it more of a significant act. Now, salvage effects were also continued with visual balancing to allow the best possible read to help players understand what's happening throughout the hull stripping gameplay loop. A new vehicle had its visual effects pass completed, and 2 other vehicles entered visual effects production after the completion of their pre-production phase. Now, I would assume that one of these is the STV ground buggy, but what the other 2 are, I don't know. But it sounds like they will be straight to drivable or flyable vehicles, as visual effects is a downstream team. Could this be for CitizenCon, 318, Intergalactic Aerospace Expo? We will see. Finally, various bugs and tweaks were made to the new derelict locations, as well as some miscellaneous support for other areas of the game. So there you have it, quite the report with a lot of very exciting features coming along, some great work going on with AI, ships, locations. It is moving really fast. But with that said, if you do enjoy my videos, please do consider subscribing and helping the channel to grow. Also, come and hang out over at twitch.tv/supermacbrother. After CitizenCon, we will certainly be talking a lot more about what we saw, maybe having a little watch party afterwards. I won't be hosting a watch party, but we can check out the panels afterwards. Hit the thumbs up if you don't mind, it does the channel a big favour, and tick that notification bell if you would like to be notified when my videos go live. Again, huge thank you to my patrons and channel members for all of your support. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.